Right. Very good evening from here, Glasgow, Scotland, United Kingdom, and a warm welcome to you wherever you are. This is the Nigerian Society of Engineers, Glasgow branch, Scotland, the UK. And my name is Emmanuel Salifu. I'm the Publicity Secretary of the branch, and I'll be moderating this session of our ninth webinar in this year. We're focusing on COP26 this month in this webinar session. And the theme we're looking at is the role of engineering in Africa's climate pledge. That music you heard just now is from Michael Jackson, and it says the earth is weeping, the earth is crying, the earth is dying, it's suffering, however you want to say it. There's a climate emergency globally, and it's beyond just trying to salvage the problem. There are nuanced issues around it, including political, socioeconomic, and all of that. And so as engineers who have been described as the people who solve the problem in itself, we give the how of the climate problem. We also have to be part of the negotiations and understand how things are done from the angle of the socioeconomic, the financial part, the politics as well, if need be. And that's the only way we can do this better from our own sides. We might have questions and confusions and conflicts and issues around this. This is the forum to begin such conversations on how we can go about meeting at the same table and also, of course, working as a team with the policymakers to find the right solution to our climate problem and also to engineering innovations going forward in the future. And today we have experts with us from the African Development Bank who have graciously accepted to speak with us and interact with us today around this theme of the role of engineering in Africa's climate pledge. And we'll be looking at an overview of climate change and green growth in Africa, opportunities for COP26 and Nigeria. And we'll be having a time to interact with them after they make their presentations. We'll have the question and answer session as usual. And thereafter, you will be able to also make your contributions at that session. As usual, I encourage you to engage with us on our social media platforms, send us emails, messages on Twitter, on Facebook, visit our websites and see what we're doing. And we have all the recordings of our webinars uploaded to our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe and follow us, and you'll be notified whenever we upload these videos. This current webinar as well is being recorded and will be uploaded in the same channel. And yes, as usual, we'll be running through the program in this order. After this introduction, we'll be having a welcome remark briefly from the chairman of the branch, and thereafter the first talk. I think the first talk now is by Dr. Arona Soumare, so apologies for that mix up there. And then we might have a short trivia in between. We'll see how we do with time, and then move on to the second talk, and then the Q&A, comments, remarks, interactive sections, and some final talks, final remarks before we wrap up for today. Without further ado, I want to welcome the the branch chairman of Glasgow branch, Dr. Olusegun Adediro, to present his welcome address. I think we're expecting the national president of the NSC. That's why I was going to say national there. So if he joins us, we'll recognize his presence as well. But for now, I welcome Dr. Olusegun Adediro, CEng MNSC, the chair, NSC Glasgow branch, for his welcome address. Over to you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We appreciate you taking your time out of a very busy time, especially with what is happening around the world now. Globally, things are changing quickly, and situation is making us to respond to things quickly. The same way we've responded to the pandemic and COVID-19 is the same way, it's the same attitude the world want to keep, to cultivate the same habit and make sure we respond to this. The climate change is a serious thing now. You know, the way things are changing, the temperature, you can't really predict anything. All the data they've got over the years is failing. That brings the question, what can we do to change things? Part of the response to address this, that's what the NSC Glasgow branch, what we are doing tonight, what we are doing this evening. What can we do to change things? What can we do? Part of what we can do is what we are doing now. And I hope by the time we finish, even before before we started the recordings, the program, we've had this conversation. I want to keep it going, want to make it open. I believe by the time we finish this program today, few of us will be able to get one or two things and take it up to our various workplaces and career professional on our places and make sure to open that discussion. That discussion, let us make it open. Let's keep it open, and it's something that is very sensitive now. I want to recognize the chairman of the Nigeria Society of Engineers and the Osogbo branch, Engineer Wale Alonge. Thanks for joining us, Engineer Wale Alonge. And also want to recognize the Engineer Ibrahim Amadiko, FNSC. And thanks for joining us as well. And I want to recognize the colleagues all over the world from the US, Canada, every corner of the world joining us, especially from Nigeria, Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you. Yeah, I don't want to take too much of time. It's a complex topic. It's not a topic that I'm expert in. So I want to see that as well. I enjoy all the opportunities that Nigeria want to take on board, even us that we're based in Glasgow, things we can possibly do to keep the things rolling. Without any delay, I will now hand over to Dr. Salivu to continue with the program so that we can watch out for time. Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining us, everyone. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman NSC Glasgow branch, for that very brief and welcome remarks. Yes, as you have said, this is not a topic we are all versed in as engineers. We're here to learn something real new, and the experts are in the house and ready to take us through. I'll be moving on right now to invite the first guest speaker today for his talk. I'll introduce him right now. The profile is quite lengthy, but I'll just do my best to give a brief one that we can have here. Our speaker is Dr. Arona Soumare. He is a regional principal officer at the African Development Bank. He leads the bank's work on climate change and green growth in the 14 countries that consist the bank's West Africa region. This includes supporting countries' access to climate finance for implementing their Paris Agreement commitments and mainstreaming climate change in all bank policies and programs. In addition, he leads policy dialogues with national and regional governments on developing policy frameworks for managing local and regional economic and social issues, regional integration, food security, climate change, resilience, and inclusive growth. He's a leading expert in the field of environment and natural resources management. Arona has more than 20 years of experience, most of which is in the sector of conservation and sustainable development, especially in Africa. Prior to joining AfDB, the African Development Bank, he was program manager for international environmental negotiations, climate change, biodiversity, and desertification at the Institute of La Francophonie for Sustainable Development, IFDD, in Canada. He also worked as Senior Natural Resources Management Specialist at Islamic Development Bank and as Conservative Program Director for Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, West Africa, leading the conception and implementation of WWF program in this region. Arona is the co-author of several studies and journal articles in the field of environmental management. For his paper on global environmental issues, he received the Start Young Scientist Award for the Pan-African region in 2000. Arona holds a doctorate in geography from UCAD, a Master of Sciences in Environmental Impact Assessment from the University of Wales in the UK, a Master of Art in International Affairs from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Tufts University, USA, and a degree in Sustainable Management of the Environment at the University of California at Berkeley in the United States. It's a very thick profile. I have the singular honor and privilege to welcome Dr. Arona Soumare for his talk. Over to you, Dr. Soumare. I'll stop sharing my screen and then take over here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting the African Development Bank to this brainstorming session, because it's a brainstorming session. We'll be discussing with the peers and professionals The idea for us is not to provide a lecture, but just to review you on where we sit at African Union Bank, the issue we're facing on in terms of climate change and the upcoming COP, and what are the opportunities. And I hope that the idea will also learn from you. And at the end of this talk, we'll have some interesting way forward. If you are to provide solution for our continent. Yeah, so the framework of this talk is really just maybe start by giving some brief overview of the climate change issues in Africa and where we are today, and then discuss a little bit about this NDC update process for mainly for West Africa. The NDCs are the key climate action plan for our countries to set the ambition and define their roadmap on how they want to address climate change. And then we can boil down to the issue we shall at stake at COP. I'll be much more talking from a West African perspective on this, and just take you through the key issue at stake for the African countries, for the West African countries, as we are heading to the upcoming COP. Highlight one of the role of the African Union Bank and how do we address the issue at stake at the bank. And then I will give the floor to my colleague Innocent, who will be much more focusing on the issue around climate change and green growth opportunity in Africa, and what are the way forward, and at national level what the bank is doing in Nigeria, and what kind of response and plan and activities and investment strategies we are putting in place for Nigeria. Yeah, of course, we are heading at COP26, and I think the last APPC report has been loud and clear on the issue of climate change. And if you look at our continent over the last 3 decades, we have more than 2,000 major disasters. The COVID-19 has also added a new challenge on us, and climate change is seen as an economic problem, a social problem, but also an environmental problem. And one of the ways to solve it is really to have a world society approach to that. And it has huge effect on our economies, as we all know. It has triggered a lot of displacement of public expenditure. You have seen it over the last years in East Africa and in South Africa with the cycle like Ida. You have seen it in countries like Lesotho in South Africa, where sometimes a government has to reallocate money, investment to deal with emergency linked to climate change. And the second thing is all the impact on people. I was talking about this 2000 major disaster which has happened over the last decades in Africa. It alters lives, livelihood, it affects human health, and we have seen with the COVID-19 when sometimes the bank want to provide a solution for COVID-19, and then we realize that these guys doesn't have access to electricity even for the health center. It affects crops, and we have seen a lot of crop failure over the last years, and a lot of fatalities, and also a lot of issue around destroying critical infrastructure. Coastal erosion is one of the key issues in a country like Nigeria, but overall in West Africa. We're taking a big toll on sea level rise and coastal erosion. And of course, this has a lot of side effects at the economic level. This is the domino effect I was talking about, loss of employment, weak capacity at national level, but also a lot of impact on the poverty of our countries. So this is climate change is maybe one of the critical issue, and in economic wise, and we all see now with the COP and the discussion we're having now that we can't just have business as usual. If you have to sort out this issue, we have to break the silos. If you have to sort this, we have also to come out with innovative solutions and not look at climate change not as a risk but also as an opportunity. Now the issue is how do we look opportunities? Next slide. And if you look at the issue in a broader sense, one of the key issues is how do you frame the climate change issue in Africa, and the issue is really how to make sure that it doesn't affect our development progress and create some locking effects, which can hinder, potential opportunities for our continent. And it includes, all the threats we're facing now in terms of, inclusive and development, but also how do we see the climate change issue from the angle and the prism of poverty alleviation? Because at the end of the day, for us, the bottom line is not just, CO2 emissions. The bottom line is, how do we move to a much more sustainable development pathway, and how do we address some of the issues? And this is why, for us, the issue around climate change is really linked to the sustainable development goals. And if you look at issues like poverty, which is SDG 1, we have today to lift millions and millions of Africans out of poverty. And this has become worse with the COVID-19 situation. If you look at the SDG 3 on promoting healthy life and so on, healthcare has been a huge issue even during the COVID-19, and we have seen it at the bank. And is that, for us to address healthcare in most of our country, we have to provide drinkable water, we have to provide electricity, and is that air pollution is taking, is one of the key drivers for mortality in most of the African cities. So we have to see it from this angle, and the same apply for access to water. If we more than 26% of African countries that have no access to drinking water. The same apply for access to energy. We have around 600 million people who have no access to energy. If you move to a country like Guinea, they have like 3% access of electricity. So we need to find a balance between, addressing the issue of climate change and also all the development issues which are linked to climate change. And as we are discussing now, before we start this meeting, Africa has really a very common but also very differentiated responsibilities when it comes to climate change. The continent is not a high emitter, as we know. Our contribution to the greenhouse emission and to CO2 emission is less than 3% as we speak. And if you compare to North America and in Europe, and even if you look at our cumulative impact in terms of CO2 and emission, we as a continent were less emitting, and this is true even today. But at the same time, we are the one who are having the huge burden when it comes to climate change. We are hosting the top 10 most vulnerable countries in the world are in Africa. Climate change is interacting with many non-climate change drivers, which also accelerate, the vulnerability. And we have all the issue around water and food insecurity, which also have huge link with the climate change. We know that, when climate change pattern change, in our countries, when you have erratic rainfall season like we had last year, when you have, heavy rains, it affects food security, it affects water access, it increases damage on infrastructure, it triggers migration, as we have seen this year in the Sahel region, where we have many displaced people who are linked to the issue of climate change. And if you look at also sector by sector, the sector we're emitting the most is mainly the sector linked to energy and agriculture, but we see very less emission from industrial processes, just because we know the level of industrialization of our continent. So, and this is also something people have to consider, mainly countries when they do the NDC. We have really to focus on the critical sectors for our continent and really find our own way, because we may not have the same sector in terms of sector emission and so on. And this issue around addressing climate change from national circumstances become very critical, and this is one of the tricky points in the discussion now. Of course, we have to have general threshold and so on, but at the same time, we have really to look at the figures and from African angle. And the same applies for the climate finance flow. If you look at the continent, and the need for climate change financing is huge. If you look at the adaptation investment for Africa, we're talking about billions between 26 to 21 billion per year. If you look at the financial flow in Africa as compared to other continents, the sub-Saharan Africa is only receiving around 3% of the global finance. If you look at my figures in your right, in your left, you can see that most of the climate change financial flows are still located in Asia, East Asia, a big chunk in North America and Europe, and very, very few in Africa. And the same thing applies if you look at it from a private sector angle. The private sector contribution to climate finance is very, very low as compared to the public finance until now. And most of them are really geared to mitigation and very few to adaptation, which is one of the key priority for the African countries. This is why at the bank, we have set a very ambitious target to allocate around 40% of our investment to climate change, and make sure that when we address climate change, around half of the investment are really geared to adaptation, because this is one of the critical issues for the continent. So what is at stake for COP26 for our continent? Of course, if you look at the Paris Agreement, which has been signed years ago now, 5 years ago, it has really 3 components. The first one is helping countries, pushing countries to reduce the emissions, which is called mitigation, and to keep it below 2 degrees, and even some people say below 1.5 degrees. The second thing is to enhance resilience, by really putting the emphasis on adaptation and resilience. The third dimension is to make sure that financial contribution, financial investment are really aligned with the goal on mitigation and adaptation. For COP26, UK is adding a new dimension. They say that for all this to happen, they have to trigger further cooperations and trigger leverage, new type of investment, new type of way of doing business, so countries can meet this. Okay, so I think I can skip this slide. It's just about what does it take to address the issue of adaptation and mitigation and for our countries. I think I have to speak to the issue of this $100 billion, which has been promised years ago, and African countries are still eager to see this financial money flowing to the continent and flowing to the key investments they need. Of course, if you look at the figures since over the last 10 years, we are still running very short in terms of leveraging enough funding, enough financing for climate change, despite all the promise, all the pledge and commitment which has been given to the continent to really start financing climate change. And the same applies if you look at private sector finance, which is really very, very low as compared to many other regions in the world. So COP26 will be very important in terms of how do we close the gap in terms of emission, how do you close the gap in terms of addressing all the issues around climate adaptation, but also how do you close the gap in terms of finance? And I think people are saying, okay, maybe Glasgow will be a finance COP, and most of the can be really focusing on how do we trigger and how do we make sure that the financial flows are really in line with the ambition. And for the UK has been really putting a huge emphasis on encouraging African countries at large to really revise the NDCs, this national determined contribution, which is the climate change strategy for countries done on a voluntary basis, which sets the targets for how countries are intending to really reach their targets. The second thing they're really pushing forward is the issue around having a long-term strategy. So instead of having this 5 years time frame, having a longer term time frame and having a much more world society approach where they can look at climate change from a economy-wide approach and from a longer term. And of course, increase financial commitment and trigger countries to do more for climate change. This is why if you look at the COP26 program for the UK, the emphasis is really on adaptation, and they have been developing a lot of initiatives, with the climate change resilience, the adaptation coalitions, so they can really raise the issue around how can we help countries to adapt? And even at COP26, you will have on the 8th of November, a dedicated session on adaptation and loss and damage, which is one of the priority for the COP. The second thing which has happened and which has been triggered is all the issue around nature-based solution, how to design with nature and how do you use nature, natural capital as, one of the key area for adaptation. And the UK has been pushing a lot on this one. And at COP26, we'll have a day, day 6, which is really devoted to nature and how nature conservation can really help to preserve biodiversity, but also help to trigger and use as a buffer zone to address climate change. Of course, we have this huge debate about energy transition and how to accelerate transition to clean energy. And at COP26, there will be a panel on energy transition and how this energy transition has to be happen if you have to transition from dirty fuel to clean energy, and what does it take in terms of encouraging use of renewable energies and so on. Yeah, transport is also very big on the agenda, and mainly as one of the trigger for global transition to zero emission and the issue of finance. These are the 5 priorities UK has been putting in place and pushing for over the last years. And if you look at the West African continent on the issue I'm raising now, you can see that we can see how does it reflect on the NDC approach in West Africa. So far, as of today, 86 countries have submitted new NDCs. There was a very big push before Glasgow for countries to start, setting new targets. But if you look at the nitty-gritty of the issues, only 17 countries have really put something stronger than they did 5 years ago in Paris. So countries are still very reluctant to really increase their ambition, and only 9 countries did not really increase the ambition. All of them are trying to set new targets, but at the end of the day, you realize that they don't yet have very stronger indices. Some countries are now seeing this opportunity to really shift and have new targets and even new indices. And 73 countries in the world has decided not to update the indices and just keep the targets as it was before Glasgow. And if you look at West Africa, you can see that most of our countries are now in this process to update the NDC. Nigeria is part of them. They have updated the new NDC in July. So the other countries are in the process. Only one country have really designed a new NDC. This is the Gambia. The Gambia has decided to have a new NDC, and they're even going beyond by having what they call a longer-term strategy, which can address the issue of climate change from a larger perspective from now to 2040, 2045, I think. So this is a process now. Other countries are still lagging behind. And one of the issues West African countries are really raising is how often they have to do this process. Every 5 years, every 10 years, and what kind of indicators they have to put in place so they can be held accountable and really monitor the target. So those things we are facing is, even when they're very ambitious, most of them are what they call conditional. It means I will go beyond if I have more money. If I have more money, and that money is one of the critical issues they have to face. You can skip this one, sir. And yeah, and then you can. This is the ecosystem where we are operating, and I just give you some insight on how the bank is trying to address the issue. And the bank is trying to address the issue from different pillars. One of it is adaptation. How do we really put the emphasis on all the issue around transition to green growth, because we can't do business as usual, but we have also to take into account the economic situation of our countries. So this issue around green transition is really something very, very, very critical. And the green transition has to be a just transition. We cannot leapfrog. Countries have very different struggles in terms of access to energy, access to other things. And so if you have to develop a new low carbon pathway, it has to be a gradual transition, and it implies a lot of issues around transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology, having access to the right solutions, and so on. The second dimension is all the issue around how do you mobilize funding, because for us to drive new green and inclusive and sustainable and green growth, world society approach, we have to leverage further funding for this to happen. And of course, we also have to provide the enabling environment for the country to do that by helping them to have a much more broader strategy, starting from the NDCs to the long-term solution, but also linking it to the SDGs so they can have a much more integrated approach, so you can break the silos and not address climate change just from the angle of climate change, but also from the angle of the different sectors: agriculture, land use, forestry, industrialization, access to green growth, and all those issues, which are really key issues for development. So the real vision of the bank is really to have a much more integrated approach on green growth, but focusing on smooth transition. Taking into account that we have to also leverage a lot of funding and support from the private sector if you are to achieve that, given the financial gap we are facing now. Son, you can move to the next one. And this trigger in our different programs. We have at African Roadmap what we call the High Five. The High Five is the 5 strategic priorities the bank has been put in place over the last years. And we have had a climate change action plan, which is now to be renewed. But if you look at the 5 sectors where the bank is operating, from energy to agriculture to industrialization to integration to improving quality of life, we're trying to find from these different sectors and different priorities how climate change can be addressed, from promoting clean energy to fostering renewable energy to climate smart agriculture, strengthening the resilience of the farmers, to the issue of industrialization of Africa and how can we improve the value chain and how can we make it greener? How can we build a much more resilient infrastructure which can withstand climate change? And how do we make sure that by building resilient infrastructure, countries are no longer displacing assets when disasters come, but they can have a stronger early warning system. For instance, by just improving our early warning system in Africa, we can make more than 162 billion of saving just by having a good weather climate information services, which can provide early warning as they did in other countries. And this is really one of the framework under which the bank is operating, and under the new deal of energy, under all the issue on how do you promote energy efficiency in our portfolio, how do we reduce deforestation and forest degradation so we can reduce emission by working on the issue around forestry. Access to clean cooking is also another area where the bank has been doing a lot, and all this issue around how do we green Africa industrialization. And I think this speak to the engineers when you talk about greening industrialization in Africa and come out with new solution. And over the last years, the bank share for supporting renewable energy has been double, even triple, 100% over the last years. Son? And my last slide is really on all the enabling environment we have to put in place. We're asking countries to develop new NDCs, develop new targets, leapfrog, identify new solution. And for us for them to do that, they have to have stronger NDCs, stronger plan of action for climate change, which is really across sector, but also which can help them to bring about innovation, which is sometimes missing in most of the structure they have been developing. So we have put in place what we call the Africa NDC Hub. And the Africa NDC Hub is just a facility we have been putting in place for countries so they can assess what are the technology gaps, how they can access climate finance, how they can work on issues like technology transfer, and also how they can get involved in the private sector. So we have been supporting this process for many countries so they can really translate that into action, and to mainly for us as bankable projects, bringing innovation and funding innovation and de-risking some of the investment. And one of the entry points to do that is the new program we are now launching. I think Innocent can speak more about this issue. And this is the new program the bank has been putting in place on circular economy. Trying to see if we are to revamp our economy, how can we use some entry points to do that. Food security is one of them. Food waste is one of them. And what are the state of the art in terms of converting it to fertilizer? How do we increase the circularity of the food system? Plastic waste recycling, e-waste recycling, which is one of the big issues now most of the African countries are facing, and all this, making sure that Africa is not a dumping ground on e-waste. And also, we're also working now with the textile industry to see, working with the fashion industry and the textile, so we can also bring some sustainability and greening on the sector. Big sector we have to address, which is yet to be done, is all the issue on forestry and the mass timber in industry. And so this program is all about for us to to use the cutting edge knowledge on circular economy, so we can provide solution. And this is the essence of our next action plan. So our next action plan, the bank will be really focusing on these two areas, which is climate finance. So championing, parity between adaptation and mitigation, so countries can really, access to finance. Bringing Minister of Finance to the picture, because most of the time this is discussed with Minister of Environment, climate change. But the issue we're facing are industrialization, is around transport, they're around other sectors, and we have to bring Minister of Finance, who most of the time have a final say on budget allocation in terms of what are the priority for the countries in board, so they can start looking at climate change from a different angle, not as a risk, but also as an opportunity. And what we kept saying to our countries, the indices are not just to address climate risk, they're also investment opportunities. We're talking about $3 billion, which can regional if you have the right solution in place. Yes, and the second dimension is also issue on building capacity. We know that there has huge capacity gaps, even for countries to have access to climate information services, have early warning system when disasters comes. So we have a special program working on how to improve access to climate information. And the third part is all the issue around technology. And we have put in place now what you call the Africa Acceleration Ambition Program, which is also around how do you bring digital technology to the climate change angle, to the climate sector. How do we make sure that people can make informed decisions when it comes to climate change? How they can use how they can leapfrog in terms of access to know-how. And the Great Green Wall also is another huge program the bank has been engaged in. We're talking about 6.5 billion for the 5 years to come. And the overall idea is to have some entry point, and agriculture is one of the entry points. Energy is another one. Infrastructure is a third also entry point we're using for that, with the aim of reaching the mitigation goals, so reduce emission, unlocking new opportunities, de-risking financial support, but also bringing know-how to the process, because most of the time the big gap is know-how is sometimes missing, and countries are always calling for transfer of technology, but it has to be in line with its own circumstances and their capacity. And also we have also to think about how to create new jobs, green jobs, and what are the gaps in terms of skills, because sometimes the job for the next jobs for tomorrow has to be created. And how do you bring in all the young generation about this new technology, and make sure that we can open new market for them. This is really the framework under which the bank will be working for the years to come. And maybe I'll now give the floor to Innocent. Innocent, maybe you can take us more through Nigeria and what you do and how it links to the global agenda and the COP26 process.
Okay, I'll just interject. Thank you very much, Dr. Arona Soumare, for this wonderful presentation. This is a very good roundup of the African overview of the approach to climate change and how Africa is working around it. Thank you so much. It's been a great honor having you presenting this to us today. I'm particularly touched about the fact that most of the central issues around this is about energy, about agriculture, about infrastructure, about industrialization. And this is exactly where engineering comes in. You've mentioned also that these are the entry points that the bank is working around and looking for technical know-how, looking for the experts in these areas and thinking about technology transfer and all of that. And that's exactly what the NSC Glasgow is specifically aligned and keen to do. We work around transferring technology of Nigerian engineers, African engineers abroad home to implement some of these ideas, training, qualifications that we all have garnered. And it's so great hearing all of this in your talk, from the high fives and all the policy pillars and structures to the 5 bets of the circular economy and all of them together. Thank you very much once again for this excellent presentation. Questions are already coming in. Please feel free to send your questions in the chat box. There will be time for the experts to address the questions, and we can also have discussions. But I think I'll be moving straight up to the second talk now. And Dr. Innocent Onah is already standing by. I'll just read his brief profile before introducing him over to take the floor. Dr. Innocent Onah works at the African Development Bank as climate change and green growth consultant, where he's responsible for managing climate risks and green growth opportunities in the bank's investments in Nigeria. He jointly coordinates a high-level working group of individual and institutional members under the auspices of the Nigerian Circular Economy Working Group, NCEWG, convening and mobilizing resources to develop and implement the Nigerian Circular Economy Roadmap. Dr. Onah's expertise intersects green economy, governance of natural resources, climate change, and sustainable business investments. He has over 15 years cross-sectoral experience in policy, strategy, and practice of environmental, climate change, and sustainability applications in government, non-governmental, private sector, and international organizations. He's accumulated travel experiences across 20 countries covering Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, and North America. Dr. Onah has acquired some diplomatic skills, facilitating high-level meetings for senior government officials through the North-South cooperation that has benefited Nigeria. He was listed twice in 2015 and 2016 by the Wire Nigeria 100 Power List for most influential young Nigerian under age of 40 policy and research category. He was the 2018 recipient of the Nigerian Green Economy Award by the Sustainable Energy Practitioners Association of Nigeria, CPAN. Dr. Onah holds a doctorate in Geography, Environmental Resource Management from Nasarawa State University in Kefi. He has a master's degree in Agricultural Sciences and Resource Management from University of Bonn in Germany, and a bachelor's degree in Agriculture Economics option from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria in Nigeria. He is a member of the Council for Renewable Energy of Nigeria, CREN, and the International Association for Energy Economics, IAEE, in the United States of America. He has published academic papers in high-impact peer-reviewed journals like the Elsevier World Development and Springer Climate Change. Distinguished guests, please welcome Dr. Innocent Onah for his presentation. Dr. Onah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Salifu. So I'll be taking us through some of the climate change and green growth opportunities for Africa. And I'll start by picking straight on renewable energy opportunities. As you can see from this map, there is an abundance of renewable energy resources across Africa, ranging from bioenergy, geothermal, hydro, marine, solar, and wind. So despite the challenges that climate change has posed on Africa, we still have these opportunities available, and the shortcomings will probably be financing. And just like my colleague has already presented before, is a mix and match of financing, capacity building, and also tweaking our policies in a way that helps to enhance access to renewable energy across the continent. This will significantly contribute to global efforts at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Another key sector is the agricultural opportunity. On a scale, Africa has the most underdeveloped arable land, equivalent to 25% of the world's fertile land. While climate change remains a major threat to this sector, it also offers opportunities to increase Africa's annual agricultural output from around $280 billion to as much as $880 billion by 2030. You can clearly see that this is a good prospect for Africa to feed itself and create jobs. And this forms a bedrock of the bank's high five on feed the people of Africa. So the strategy is to invest in climate smart agriculture. This will raise smallholders' income It will reduce vulnerability and strengthen national food security, as well as lowering greenhouse gas emissions. The city opportunity is the complex one. As we all know, cities are growing faster than ever in the developing world, and particularly in Africa. Cities are powerhouses of economic growth. They are expected to produce about 85% of global GDP in 2015, along with between 71 and 76% of energy-related global greenhouse gas emissions. Cities are also particularly vulnerable to floods, storm surges, and other climate impacts, particularly near the coast and along the rivers. The infrastructure investments made in cities in the next few years need to both carbon, it needs to be both low carbon and also climate resilient. So cities can take the smart route by adopting more compact, connected, and efficient development while increasing economic productivity, improving air quality, public health, and reducing poverty and enhancing safety. So smart cities are about building healthier, more livable, and more productive cities, which also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There are also new technologies and business models that constitute climate change opportunities. Renewable energy, as we all know, the price is falling fast. It's making solar PVs very affordable. There are innovations in business models around the sales, demand, and supply of renewable energies that blockchain technology is being applied in some countries. This is expanding access to renewable energy. Battery storage is another key area where new technology and business models can be applied. As we all know, the increasing demand will also see prices fall, like solar batteries, for example. In the transport sector, we are also aware that there's a negative impact of improving standards in Europe, particularly dumping diesel cars in Africa. So the transport sector constitutes a very good sector that new technologies and business models could help see climate change as an opportunity rather than a problem. So other sectors is energy efficiency in built environments, waste management, agriculture, clean cooking, and also the regulatory environment, which is very important for all of this to happen. So for green growth opportunities, African economies are heavily dependent on natural resource exploitation. For this reason, green growth offers considerable opportunities to address environmental challenges through policies and investments. Top on the agenda is prices, policies, and regulations around green growth. Also, the issue of capacity on green investments. The financial sector are yet to really grasp the idea of green investments. So both institutional capacities are very relevant here to tap into green growth opportunities. I already mentioned the financial industry. So unlocking financing in green investments is an area that needs to happen for green technologies to be deployed massively at scale in Africa. So what is bank experience? I will start by using Nigeria's NDC as a case study. The bank has been a strong supporter for implementing Nigeria's NDC. We do so by looking at all the strategic measures and key targets in Nigeria's NDC and ensuring that we align our investments with these NDC targets. So a few key measures, one on top is ending gas flaring. Because Nigeria is an oil and gas producing country, this area is an area that the bank tried to align its investment. The NDC, Nigeria's updated NDC as of July this year, has put a target of 60% reduction in fugitive methane emission by 2030. That's within the oil and gas sector. The energy sector is also key, where 13 gigawatts of renewable energy, which is a combination of solar home systems, street lights, mini grids, and also self-generation. There's also another key measure of ensuring that 7.3 million households adopt and use improved cook stoves by 2030. This is formed on the basis that there's increased deforestation and logging of wood because people need to collect firewood for cooking as a result of poor energy access. There's also a key measure that 2.5% per year of energy efficiency by 2030 will be achieved. There is also a 25% of trucks and buses using compressed natural gas by 2030. There is also a measure to improve grid transmission and distribution losses by 8%. elimination of diesel and gasoline for electricity generation, climate smart agriculture and reforestation. And then the red text is just the additional sectors and measures that were added in the revised NDC that was submitted this year. One is to adopt integrated water resource management approaches to manage Nigeria's river basins, and also application of circular economy approach to achieve recycling rate of at least 7.47% by 2030, which the bank is proudly a supporter of. So the key sectors in Nigeria's NDC is agriculture and land use, energy, industry, oil and gas, transport, and then the two new additional sectors, water, waste, and circular economy, that was proudly supported by UNDP and the African Development Bank. So there are also other key country systems. There's the green bond principles. Nigeria has successfully issued 2 rounds of green bonds within the last 5 years, and they are at the point of issuing the 3rd green bond to raise around 25 billion naira strictly for green projects in Nigeria. The National Assembly has standing committees of the Senate and House of Representatives that carry out oversight on climate change and environmental issues. The Central Bank of Nigeria has the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which sets guidelines to commercial banks in Nigeria to report on their environmental and social governance framework that also includes climate reporting of greenhouse gas emissions. There is the Nigeria Economic Sustainability Plan, which is a post-COVID-19 response to bouncing back the Nigerian economy. There's a new national climate change policy for Nigeria. And then there is a Nigeria long-term low emission development strategy that was recently designed. There's also a national plastics waste policy and extended producer responsibility. And also the Nigeria Circular Economy Working Group, which I jointly coordinate with the government. This working group is keen on producing natural capital action plans and circular economy roadmap, all in a low carbon development pathway and in a climate resilient pathway. So these are members of the Nigeria Circular Economy Working Group, as introduced by the moderator. It's a group of partners, both institutional and individual, across different organizations. You can see the range of partners in Nigeria, all with the aim of developing a robust circular economy agenda for Nigeria. And this is the strategy that we are using to develop. We are trying to adopt the 3 R's and the 10 R's. We're looking at materials, improving the resource efficiency of materials by reducing waste, by reusing materials, recycling, recovering, redesigning, remanufacturing. Sometimes you have to refuse some. Sometimes we need to rethink and also refurbish. So all of these are forming part of the strategies that the working group is pushing Nigeria. And I'm sure if you look at the redesigning and remanufacturing aspect, even the recovering aspect, in fact, virtually all the 10 R's has some engineering and technology implications. And then the strategy we're also using is to ensure that it covers bioeconomy, natural capital, blue economy, green economy, and also using circular economy approaches. It is demand driven, which means the government wants it, and then the bank and other partners are supporting. It is inclusive of key stakeholders, a wide range of stakeholders. We are leveraging ongoing baseline activities already going on in the country. And then we are including circular economy. We've included circular economy in Nigeria's NDC. And we are developing a circular economy roadmap, which I've mentioned already. And we're ensuring that natural capital mainstreaming becomes part of the whole process. And the reason why we are pushing all of this, a statistic by Accenture said that the potential incremental value of circular economy in the global space is about $4.5 trillion. This is untapped. So, and this has, the International Labour Organization said it will create 45 million jobs. Africa and Nigeria need to tap into these opportunities. Now, there are the emerging climate economy means that there's going to be a shift in so many things, including our global system, agriculture, transport, construction. All of these sectors will need to be rethought. They will need to be redesigned to reduce and then remove greenhouse gases from the equation. So there are a wide range of engineering applications, and ladies and gentlemen, that climate change and green growth provides a very good opportunity. My colleague have mentioned some in his presentation. My next slide, I just did a small matrix based on COP26 expectations and what we think and what I think this discussion is all about. I will try to suggest a few, but from this picture, you could see that carbon capture and storage is a key engineering technology that still requires a lot of investment and thought processing, and also climate smart agriculture and precision agriculture, where you could use your smartphone to monitor weather and also ensure that resources, farm inputs are used as maximally as possible. So this is the matrix. In terms of COP26, if we are adapting to protect communities and natural habitats, these are some examples of how engineering solutions could help to solve the climate crisis in Africa, and particularly Nigeria. Climate smart agriculture cannot be overemphasized. Is the golden opportunity, is the golden egg for Africa and Nigeria. So in this area, we're looking at vertical gardens, hydroponics, precision agriculture, where you use satellite farming and site-specific crop management systems. Ranching, you all know very well, there's an issue of livestock-induced conflicts in Nigeria. Ranching is a technology or a practice that could solve the problem. It requires engineering solutions that can also apply automated livestock systems, selective breeding through controlled mating, livestock disease management. So the opportunities is wide for the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector. In the water sector also, there are engineering applications for water purification systems, integrated climate change monitoring and early warning systems, rainwater harvesting, soil moisture monitoring devices. I'm sure you guys know it better if we have water engineers in the room. And then for the waste and industry, infrastructure, and energy sectors, application of nature-based solutions requires engineering designs. To build climate-resilient infrastructure and achieve energy efficiency, you need a lot of engineering expertise. My circular economy working group would definitely need a lot of engineering expertise in recycling, waste management, and those kind of areas. For mitigation, I mentioned carbon capture already in the oil and gas. There are also some biogas systems that I've noticed that some locally fabricated machines in Nigeria are already taking advantage of this to produce biogas for cooking. So the opportunity is wide for engineers to help to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. And for the energy sector, of course, you all know that is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of off-grid renewable energy through solar, offshore wind, cogeneration, green hydrogen, and the rest. So in terms of mobilizing finance, I think there's also a need for engineering and technology innovations. For example, blockchain technologies and the use of cryptocurrency to ease climate finance mobilization. Also in data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all of this can be applied to improve Africa's climate change monitoring, recording and verification systems that will help even the financial institutions to underwrite poor loans or underperforming loans, and also to design insurance products. So the scope is wide. The operationalization of the Nigerian Green Bonds program, for example, could also apply some kind of fintech technology that could help to, monitor, the operationalization of green bonds to ensure that all the goals and targets that were set in the beginning could be achievable. So this is the lesson learned in Nigeria so far. Some of it have been mentioned already by previous speakers. Legislation is important. Twice during my time working in government, a climate change bill was passed. It was never extended to. Just 2 days ago, again, I heard that the Senate of the National Assembly of Nigeria has passed again another climate change bill. So legislation is very important as a key policy tool to attract investments in all of this. All of these applications will require a lot of investments, as I expect questions to come for. So policy is also key. We could be fiscal and regulatory. There need to be some kind of subsidy or some kind of rebate for importation of green technology or renewable energy technology. So all of this will require some policy intervention. There's also need for strategic alignment with conventional economics. The conventional economics is changing to new economics, which includes climate economics. So there's a need for this strategic alignment to happen so as to fit the Nigerian economy properly into the discussion on low carbon or zero emission by a stipulated time in the future. Investment plans for the NDCs and national adaptation plans is also important. I believe the government, I know and I'm aware that the federal government is working on investment plans to help attract investment to achieve the NDCs in Nigeria. Yes, the Nigerian Society for Engineers and as well as the Glasgow branch will agree with me that technical capacity and technology transfer is key. I also know that the private sector participation is very important because there's no government that can create all the jobs and bring in all the investment that we need to solve the climate crisis. So for financing to happen, there's also need for awareness and also acceptance by the people. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, despite contributing to the least to global warming, Africa is greatly impacted by climate change. And these impacts are expected to rise in the future. Climate change comes with significant opportunities, which I've mentioned. It promotes climate resilience and low carbon development pathway across different sectors. Being one of the world's hotspots for climate impacts, the Lake Chad of Nigeria particularly needs attention. Reason is because if we want to solve some of the security issues we have in the northeastern part of Nigeria, which is cascading down south of Nigeria, we need to solve some of the natural resource-based problems we have in the north, including recharging the Lake Chad and ensuring that it's able to create sustainable livelihoods for the people of the Northeast, and also Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. The role of the African Development Bank is key. My colleague already presented our Green Roads and Climate Plan and Framework. That needs to be operationalized, and Africa needs substantial financial investments. We cannot overemphasize this. And as we head to COP26, we hope that this will provide an opportunity to mobilize the needed climate finance for Africa. I've already mentioned about the emerging climate economy. So we need to ensure that engineers play their key role. They need to design climate smart innovations to help Africa leapfrog over development. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks
very
thank
much.
you, Dr. Innocent. Just a quick one, Dr. Emma. Right. Just to make sure that why the Q&A we start the Q&A now, if you can make that to be interactive so that people can actually ask their question in real time so that they can get the response back. Let's make it a sort of open discussion. Yeah, before we start, I just want to use that opportunity and the power as the branch chairman to first ask my own questions back to you now.
Can I just a brief thanks to Dr. Innocent Onah?
Sorry. I know you will handle that part. Then
all right, okay, then go on.
Just to round it up quickly.
Right, okay.
So basically, I'm just looking at the goal of the COP is just for all the country to launch their adaptation goals and adopt a strategy for achieving, different goals that they are going to launch there. Looking at us in Africa, and a lot of all these things that you've mentioned, they looks fantastic. The work plan, a lot of work has gone to this. But my real worry is you mentioned, I was so happy to hear that towards the end of your presentation that the policy and the implementation of the policy. Based on your experience with the government, with the banks and all these big sectors, what would be your suggestion? We have some of the people that work for different organizations in Nigeria here online as well. What would be your own suggestion that how can we bring all these policy implementations to life so I'll leave Dr. Salifu to do that, but the thanks, to appreciate you for before then, if you don't mind to let me take that question first at some point. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chairman. I think there's a lot of excitement in the air right now, and it's going to be a very engaging session, I believe. Thanks once again to Dr. Onah for this wonderful talk, concluding the second part of the talk. And I was taking notes there, you know, and I'm more excited, I think, than everyone else here because my background is agricultural and environmental engineering. And so everything you're mentioning, I'm more or less at the center of it all. And I can see where the mechanical engineers, the water resources and environmental engineers, the energy guys, and everyone has a place, you know, and you've put that nicely together in one of your slides there. And just to remind everyone that the recording of this will be available so you can look through again later on. And I believe that from the interactive section we're going to have now, all of these will come to light and everyone can see where they can come in to catch in on the opportunities, the massive opportunities, the untapped opportunities that are available in this space. So again, I believe Dr. Arona is present with us, and so I'll be opening the floor for Q&A. My colleagues are on standby to manage this. We usually have Engineer Sharp and also Engineer Abon-Adus. So questions are already in the chat box. And as the chairman has rightly said, I think we have good time, more time, we have time roughly, and we can have live engagements. People can open their mics as well and engage on it. So over to you, Sas.
Thank you. Thank you. So there are some questions already in the chat room. Please, if you want to still put your question across, what you may do is to raise your hand electronically from the chat room so we can call you to present your questions. Otherwise, we can start off with the questions that are already written down in the chat room. But if, as we want to make it more interactive, please raise your hand electronically, or if you bring your camera on, and you raise your hand by raising that, we can scan through and then call you for a question. Okay, so thank you, presenters. Let's go to the first question here.
Sorry, Joshua, maybe if they can take the chairman's question.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's let the speakers respond to the chairman's question first.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Lucian, for your interesting question. Which is going to answer a lot of questions I'm already seeing on the chat room. Nigeria, as we all know it, is a country that is heavily dependent on oil and gas, and this has been happening over so many decades. So when you speak about climate change and green growth economy, or a transition to be a green economy, it requires beyond policy. It requires a total shift in mindset of people. It also requires total reorientation and reorganization of even how the government itself is constituted. And if you look at one of my slides where I was talking about lessons learned, you know, one of my last points that I put there was awareness and acceptance. There is, whether you like it or not, there's still a lot of pushback. A sector that have, you know, financed the economy for over 60 years, it's going to be pretty difficult because that sector is already mainstreamed. Until recently, the Petroleum Industry Bill, which is now Petroleum Industry Act, has just been unbundled to ensure that the operationalization of NNPC over the years begin to see things in a new light. Congratulations to the government of Nigeria, that is excellent. But we need to go beyond that. We need to begin to also show in our budgetary spendings that indeed the country wants to move in that kind of direction. So speaking of NDCs and what engineers like members of NSC in Glasgow and how they can complement what is already going on in Nigeria to ensure that NDC is implemented. This forum is an excellent one. Unfortunately, I sit on the side of the bank and not on the side of the government of Nigeria. So I need to take the side of the bank rather than the side of the government. But I think there is a space for everybody to play a role. This awareness raising and conversation need to continue. The engineers, the social scientists, the agronomists, everybody need to come together to say, for example, that Nigeria has fixed these targets for itself. And this is also directed to one of the questions I already saw in the chat room, where they're asking if there's a framework to place or make sure that the NDC target is implemented. The only framework we have, the only framework the government could have is to show its budgetary priorities, which is not yet there. And that is why if you look at one of my slides as well, you see that there is a conditional target of 47% and unconditional target of 20%. So even the country itself knows that the amount of investment requires to move to a low carbon future for Nigeria, we just simply don't have the money, we don't have the technology, and we don't even have the right policies at the right places. So all of these bottlenecks need to be resolved before we can begin to say X amount of money is required, X amount of technology can fit into X targets, and then X engineering group can help to develop or innovate X engineering solutions. So it's a conversation that can go on and on, but my simple answer is that the government of Nigeria needs to prioritize its budgetary spending, and a lot of things is hampering that from happening. You all know about the security situation in the country. We also know about the increasing cost of governance, which as a representative of the bank, I cannot speak much about. And we also know very well that the country's revenue stream is dwindling. So I'd just like to stop here, and I hope I answered Dr. Oluseun's question a bit, and I can take other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yinka Bamiro has a question. Let's.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. The question I have right now is that even in developed economies, right, when you talk about sustainable practices and everything, you find out that it's being subsidized, right? When do you think we can move from a sustainable practices trying to save the climate to where those sustainable technologies itself becomes a sustainable economy, that they begin to generate a return on your investment, that you don't keep on subsidizing it forever, right? So the reason being that if you look at the sociology aspect of things, human beings they are selfish, right? You tend to want to know, okay, what's in it for me? What do I generate in terms of economic interest, right? It's like trying to train a baby until the baby becomes, self-sufficient, that it can fish for itself. When do you think, from the African perspective, that this green economy can become sustainable? It can generate an economy that can sustain itself. So moving from sustainable technology to a sustainable economy, right? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, either yourself, Dr. Onah, or Dr. Arona can respond to that question.
Arona, do you want to take that? Is Arona on the call?
I don't get the point. I don't get the point she was raising.
Okay.
Can you summarize for me?
Okay, let me try and take it. This is a tricky question, because there has to be some analysis on investment and financial flows for sustainable technologies or new economics or climate economics versus conventional economics, for us to be able to determine the length of time it will take for us to, let me use the word break even, if we want to go the way of green technology or sustainable economy. This analysis needs to happen for us to answer this question. I cannot tell you that by so year, this is when, if Nigeria, for example, Africa decides to take this approach, by so year is when Africa will be able to now have, an unsubsidized technology that could drive itself, just the way our conventional economics is running. So all of this is part of the conversation that we're having, even at COP26 and at future COP. It's going to take some time. And like you rightly said, even the advanced and developed countries are still giving net zero emission targets and not zero emission targets. There's a difference between net zero emission targets and zero emission. Zero emission targets means they will drop fossil fuel completely, and then there will be zero greenhouse gas emissions. While a net zero emission target means there could still be some emissions, but there will be offsets available through different financial mechanisms, like perhaps the clean development mechanism that we had under Kyoto Protocol, or perhaps the ITMO one that was proposed during Paris, during the Paris negotiation. So they are giving themselves 2050. In fact, China, for example, is giving itself 2060. And these are countries that have more than 10 times Nigeria's GDP, so, or Africa's GDP. So given a timeline will be very tricky, you know. It's a challenge actually for all of us, not just for climate change specialists, because if you want to do a thorough investment and financial flow for all the sectors, it requires the engineer. I said this before, it requires the those very sensitive sectors. It requires the agricultural specialist, it requires the energy producer, and also requires the consumers to be able to say, show their preference, their consumption preference. All of this will need to be put into an equation to be able to now find out exactly what Africa will need to be able to have an unsubsidized green economy, if I may put it. So there's no direct answer to this particular question. All I know is that we are all on a journey and it's a road. And that's why we've been having several COPs. There'll be another COP next year. The conversation continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Francis Bisson.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to.
I think Dr. Arona wanted to say something on that.
Okay.
Sorry to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, as you know, one of the issues you were raising on, you know, how to subsidize, and you know, one of the things Africa is calling for is really to have a transition. And I think this country has to manage, you know, we're not talking about, you know, and this is very big even within the bank, that, you know, we have to merge, you know, the steps for this transition to happen. Of course, you know, there are some enabling conditions you have to put in place. For instance, I can give you the situation we're now facing for a country like Cote d'Ivoire, where I'm working, where I'm based. You know, we're working with them on issue around environmental taxation, for instance, you know, because we have to find, you know, a solution for if they are wanted to import, you know, photovoltaic grids, if they are to import, you know, some of the raw materials they need for the green transition. We need to find a way to subsidize it so they can, you know, have access to the technology without paying a big cost to that. For some of them, we have to put in place some schemes so we can de-risk the investment so they can make a transition, mainly in the field of energy and so on. These are the kind of, you know, support we have to provide, and we're doing it as a bank, because, you know, we can't ask them from day one just to cut off everything and, you know, and make this big jump. So if Africa has to leapfrog, we have to also to merge the steps and provide some incentive for them to do that. And this is something very critical. And I kept saying this to my European colleagues. We can't make a plan. We can make an energy plan or whatever plan. If you don't build and not take into account that some of these people, some of our population are hardly surviving. Sometimes the government can't even bear the cost of the transfer of technology. We need to find some incentive for them to do that. And we have to also, you know, have some kind of, you know, gradual transition to the green economy. And also we have also to show what is the value of doing it. And I kept telling to the colleagues that, you know, it's not about for Africa to beg for money. We have to reverse the story and say, listen, this green economy transition is also an investment opportunity. You know, if Africa's countries have to implement the indices, we're talking about 3 billion investment, new investments we can put into the sectors. If we're not able to make the business case for that, you know, even government sometimes are very reluctant to have this transition. And this is why sometimes some of the country, even when they want to set high ambition, the Minister of Finance will say, no, we can't afford it. And we have seen countries like now, most of the oil-based countries, if you are to apply the Paris Agreement as it is for the time being with the mitigation targets, you know, they'll have some stranded assets they can no longer use. We can't afford to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Francis Bisson.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a little contribution to that question on that balance between sustainable technologies and sustainable economy. I think we should see that as two sides of the same coin, because sustainability itself is a holistic terminology. Nothing can be said to be sustainable if it is one-sided. If it is not sustainable from the economic point of view, the social point of view, the ecological point of view, even the technological point of view. Just imagine a technology that could increase food production, but would leave half of the population blind. Such a technology cannot be sustainable. Or a technology like in the robotics that could increase yield or increase production, but keep majority out of job. That means that technology is socially unjust, because transition to green economy must be a just transition. And so we must begin to see technology from the holistic, or sustainability from the holistic point of view. So we can assess technological applications, appraise it to be sure it is not inequitable, it is balanced. And the idea is that economics itself is now seen as a discipline of the biosphere. It's not outside the biosphere. So economics had gone on as though it is apart from the biosphere. And that is why we are having an economic system, a linear economic system, that is creating a whole lot of environmental backlash and social backlash. And at the end of the day, it is not sustainable on the long term. So sustainability is holistic. We as Africans and Nigerians must appraise any technological solutions to be sure it is appropriate, it is consistent, it is adaptable, it is sustainable from all points of view. Then that is, so I don't even see any contradiction. Yes, there could be technologies that are not sustainable, but the moment we say sustainable technology, it is implicit that it will do all the job and it will fit into that framework of sustainability. So that's just the best way to see it. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Francis Bisson. Uchenna Ibe, please, can you field your question?
Thank you very much. Before my question, let me just, just say a thing or two about the same sustainability stuff. To start with, I work in the energy sector, so most of the things I will say will come from that perspective. So then, with my experience in the UK about the industry being supported and then them, taking off the ground and supporting themselves, I think I support a lot what Innocent Onah said about the question. My experience here in the UK, there's something we call CFD. We call CFD, we use, and that's how government supports offshore wind, where I've done a lot. So what actually that means, when we started that, they designed it in such a way that it's a support mechanism, but they designed it in such a way that it's competitive, and that at some point, that support will withdraw itself, and this technology, the industry will begin to, it will take off on its own. And that's exactly what is happening now. That mechanism has been there for quite some time. And now I can tell you, though it's still there, they're still using it to really drive the ambition they have for green growth and everything. But the way it is designed, it can actually sustain itself now. And what that means, there are so many offshore wind projects that we can actually model now and build them without that support. I support a lot what Innocent said. It's not something we put a time frame to when you say when it gets to this particular time we are going to sustain ourselves. No, all those things work as you move, as you do, how you develop that policy, and then how you begin to move and get into it. At time we come when everything will just it will be sustainable on itself. That's about that. And then my question is on the bank on our, because we know this climate change or all this, things we are talking about, it will require a lot of investment. And some of this investment, major investment in energy sector now in Africa, it flew from foreign capital coming in, and then plus people like African Development Bank and some DFIs and all those sort of things. Is there anything at all we are doing within our financial sector locally in Nigeria, in Africa, to really bring them up to speed, to begin to look into this? I know the technologies are there. They probably don't know a lot of things about technology. They need that support. But in my own opinion, I think in the long term, we would really need them to be active. I mean, local finance, local funding, to really be active in this sector for us to, meet our targets in terms of NDC and everything. So that's one. Again, Innocent, I looked at some of the technologies you mentioned in your presentation. I know we have a lot of emphasis on gas, which is very understandable. Is there anything at all? Were we thinking about hydrogen at all? I mean, if you look around the world now in the global energy sector and everything we're talking about, climate change and stuff, hydrogen is just gaining that momentum. And as Africans, I think we have that same resources. The same fossil fuel resources we have that renewable resources also to be relevant in that future of energy. So are we thinking at all anything about green hydrogen? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the finance part, only Dr. Onah or Arona, you can decide who go first, or you can both comment on the question.
Okay, let me try, since he specifically wanted to know about climate finance efforts in Nigeria locally. So I must tell you that, to be fair with the government, there's a lot of effort being made within the country. I'll start with ongoing efforts, and then I'll also tell you what needs to be done where there are still gaps. The Nigeria Green Bonds Program is the first of its kind in Africa. That program is a domestically designed program that catalyzes domestic resources in Nigerian Naira to finance green projects. Most of them are low carbon projects and climate adaptable projects. This program came on stream in 2017, and it's literally almost 5 years now. I said it during my presentation. So that is already a climate finance domestic strategy that was designed by the government during former Minister, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed. And then it went on, and now they're issuing the third bonds. And like I told you, I've been engaged in building capacity of some of the ministry departments and agencies in the country on how to design green projects to be able to qualify for Nigerian Green Bonds Program. So you can see that that capacity building effort was not even targeted at AfDB money. It was targeted at Nigeria's own green bonds, which was floated in Nigerian capital markets with the partnership of the Securities and Exchange Commission. So locally, I think they are making an effort. The Central Bank of Nigeria also has the Nigeria Sustainability Banking Principles. Everything we're talking about is investments. And in terms of Naira and Kobo investments within the country, the CBN has a supervision role to ensure that banking, lending, and operations align to a particular direction. So the CBN recognizes Nigeria's climate change efforts, including Nigeria's NDC, and they've developed these sustainable banking principles that mandates all commercial banks in Nigeria, name them, Zenith, Access Bank, all of them. It mandates them to report on environmental and social governance frameworks, indicators, including greenhouse gas emissions. They have a template. So every year, each of these commercial banks report on their lending, or the impact their lending operations is having on environmental and social indicators, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. But the greenhouse gas emissions part was made to be voluntary. So it's not compulsory. So some banks are complying, some are not. But for those banks that want to be seen as sustainable banks, they do comply and report to the CBN. So those kind of efforts can actually stimulate climate financing in some way, because, and like I keep saying, there must be acceptance by the people. There must be an appetite for green projects by Nigerians. There must be an appetite for green loans and green lending in the first place, before the commercial banks can extend their their financial capital, and before they will be able to even take data that they can report. The third aspect, I think the country is doing a great job, is through the Nigeria sustainable financing principles. So within the CBN, again, under a coordination committee called the Federal Financial Services Regulatory Coordinating Committee. Yes, this committee, with the support of the Securities and Exchange Commission, have issued some guidelines that also speaks to some of these sustainability indicators, which means that as they regulate the financial markets, as they regulate activities that go on in the financial markets, they must look at some of these principles. So these are things that are going on. And what is the bank doing to support Nigeria? Access to climate finance, externally hosted climate finance, for example, the Green Climate Fund. One of the reasons why Africa is not tapping very much into that resource is because Africa is not complying with some of the requirements. If you ask me if those requirements are technical, I will say no. And that's because I'm an expert. But if you ask a civil servant who wants to design an infrastructure project in the Ministry of Works and Housing, for example, and wants to design that project to benefit from Green Climate Fund, yes, that requirement becomes complex for that particular officer. So they're unable to design bankable projects to attract climate financing from Green Climate Fund and other resources. So what the bank is doing is say, hey, look, why don't we, instead of coming to AfDB, World Bank, to look for Green Climate Fund, why don't we build the capacity of some Nigerian institutions so that they can also become an accredited entity to the GCF, so that they can also be able to take projects to GCF directly without passing through the bank. That way, you are building the capacity of the country to be able to further be able to access climate finance. This is ongoing, and I know that very soon the Development Bank of Nigeria would soon be accredited by GCF with kind support from the AfDB, and then they'll be able to take on some of these projects themselves to GCF and increase their access to climate finance. We also engage in capacity building. For example, in our project investments, when we design a project that has a lot of green components, what we usually do is to ensure that while designing the framework to get climate co-financing, we do it together with our clients, which are mostly government people and also some private sector players. That way, they understand the process and the capacity are able to be built to access climate finance. On green hydrogen, it's not mentioned in the NDC targets, but I know that it provides opportunity. It's a good place. I know that in East Africa, this green hydrogen discussion is pursued rigorously. Personally, I think it's a good technology that will help to also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But at the moment, Nigeria has not put in place any targets, particularly targeted at green hydrogen. Thanks. Over.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Soumare, Dr. Arona Soumare, let me put straight to you a question here that is on the screen and possibly recited. It's talking about, since on your presentation, I can remember exactly on slide number 6, your slide number 6, you gave the percentage of the contributions of the various continents, and Africa rate was ranked low, about 2 to 3%. Now, from the AfB point of view, from the AfB position, either advisory or kind of a tactical negotiation, policy or taxation, is there anything Africa can do to use the fact that we are going to suffer more on the effect of climate change? However, we are contributing less, just 4%. Europe was ranking 36%, and Asia was ranking 20%. The other continents were ranking higher, far higher than Africa. So can we use this advantage of being on the receiving end, though we are contributing only 4%? Can we use that from a financial tactical point of view, or a taxation point of view, or trade negotiation, so that we can offset or attract some resources? Is there anything AfB is doing along that line?
Yeah, Dr. Aruna. Okay, all right.
For us, the entry point is what we call climate management. The bank has a target, that 40% of our investment, irrespective of the sector, will be climate aligned. Meaning that when we fund a project on transportation or infrastructure or whatever kind of project, we always make sure that this project are taking into account climate risk and opportunities, and at least 40% of the financing will go to climate related activities. And for last year, we were around 38%, on our target.
Yeah.
So this is the first thing, mainstreaming climate change into all sectors and making sure that the financial flows goes with that and they are aligned with the sustainability and indicators and the climate change indicators. This is the first thing. The second thing is shift the perspective and look at these indices as investment opportunities. We talk about transport technology, we're talking about new innovative solution, hydrogen, and all those things. So trying to also to look at national level, what are the new opportunities for greening the sectors and how to unlock them, and what does it take? For instance, for some of them they need seed money for them to start, so subsidizing. Sometimes they need technical support, know-how, and so on. And from different funding, which are not sometimes loan but grants, we're trying to provide these grants to the country so they can cover this kind of cost and de-risking the investment. Another entry point we're using is mobilizing domestic resources by working on green taxations. So countries can leverage funding from inside and not relying on external budget to do some of the heavy lifting they have to. This is the most difficult bit if you look at the indices, because if you look at the Nigerian indice, it has like 74% is conditional, meaning they can only do it if they get money from outside. So we have to reverse the trends and see how can we be less dependent on external funding to do some of the activities you have to. The third thing we have to really work on is the issue of capacity. Most of our countries are not able to for some reason, to draft and design bankable projects, even to access funds like GCF and so on. If you look at the project cycle, sometimes it may take for countries more than 2 years, 3 years to access funding. Whereby in Asia, for most of the technology and political mitigation, they can fast track the process and get their proposals submitted to any bank in 8 months. So for us, it will take twice this time because of sometimes the issue of capacity gap. And this is why we are working on capacity building, working with the private sector, working with the banking sectors, sustainable financing, and so on. So we can bring this kind of skills in sometimes just to be able to submit good and bankable project, even at the bank level, and not speak about the GCF and so on. There's a huge capacity gap in terms of leveraging financing. The last point, which is also missing, is the part of the private sector. The private sector investment has been so far very weak because it's too risky, it's too new, and so on. And one of the things we try to do is really to have a private sector window at the bank, so we can also push private sector and support them so they can start investing in some of the key sectors, such as energy is one of them, agriculture is another sector. And SMEs is also another sector where there's a huge niche in terms of leveraging green finance, and we're not doing it enough. So these are the 5 entry points I can mention for the bank. But it has really to do with shifting the mind and not going and begging for money, but more trying to attract fund investment in the green sector, and making sure that when it is done with the national. This is something also sometimes missing in most of the private deal we are doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, Dr. Emmanuel, will pass over to you.
Thank you. All right, yeah, thank you very much, Engineer Sharp, for coordinating that, and thanks to our presenters for really addressing the questions so exhaustively. You know, we already have appreciations coming in the comments there. Do we still have a couple of minutes just to see if there's any question in the chat that has not been addressed? We can pick up.
I saw one question about solar geoengineering. Someone was asking if solar geoengineering succeeds, if that may affect green growth opportunities. Well, it may affect it, but I think it will affect it positively, not negatively, because this question may be tilted maybe to get a negative response to green growth opportunities. But no, I think it will affect it positively. And my reason is because if that technology succeeds, it means the impact of climate change will be significantly reduced. Now, that reduction in climate change impact, what it will mean, it will translate to saving some of the climate risk that is already a cost to our various countries. There was a report that was released recently where they said, was it last year during the pandemic, that the impact of climate change has cost over $1 trillion in terms of climate risk. I think this report was released by Bloomberg. Now, if this artificial solar engineering and this artificial cooling succeeds, what it means is it's saving the world an equal amount of $1 trillion. So that could still help to finance the green sector. That's assuming the green sector has already been established before this artificial thing happens. It will still be able to finance the green sector. And mind you, the green opportunities that we mentioned are already existing. It's about stepping them up or increasing the efficiency of the green sectors. Natural resource-based sectors are already green by nature. So it's about to increase the efficiency of maybe natural resource extraction that needs to happen. And it has not been happening over the years because of lack of investment. And the lack of investment is a consequence of both climate change risk and the fact that there are alternatives. So when the alternatives is reduced, it means there will now be a growth in the green side. But when the opportunities reduce and increase as a result of failure of this artificial cooling system, it equally also increases the green growth opportunity. So it's a win-win. If I want to try and answer this question, I don't see it as a negative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have roughly 10 minutes to the top of the hour, which is stretching it really to the peak. I want to thank the presenters once again for this. I don't know, it's just standing the risk not to offend anyone. I don't know if there's any.
So we just need to watch out for time. I think we'll be finishing as soon as just now.
Right.
I just want to recognize the we have people that have supported us in the course of putting this program, even within the short time that we've had to put this program in place. We have the past president of the, is a 3 times vice president of the Nigeria Society of Engineers, special advisor to Osun State Governor on water resources and energy, and is popularly known as the only Wasobi engineer, Prince Adeniran Kinlomodemo Ibitoye KLM FNSC. We have it, we just want to say thank you to you. You've helped us to really publicize this program, and you are highly recognized. If you want to say 1 or 2 things before we round up, thank you. KLM, are you available, sir? Okay. If the KLM is not available now, and not to steal the coordination of the program from Dr. Salifu, but may I just suggest that Engineer Charles Okafor, our General Secretary, to do the photo, to present the vote of thanks now to our presenter, so that we'll be able to shoot off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shehu and Dr. Emmanuel, for having taken us this far. I want to say a very big thank you to our 2 presenters. Dr. Soumare and Dr. Onah. It has been a very wonderful presentation, having the two heads together. And also I want to thank each and every one of us because of, the collaborative reasoning and, debate. This is an area that, we just can't run away. It is our everyday life as engineers, just like Emmanuel was saying, engineers try to shy away, but the bottom line is that at the end of the day, these are areas that will be a converging point for both, politically and engineering-wise. If at all we must be able to sustain our environment and the world at large. So it has been a very wonderful presentation. I know there are obstacles, when we look at our African environmental challenges that will, that will probably not allow us to drive down to this zero level. But I believe that, with discussion like this, ideas like this going on, one day we should be able to get there. Definitely, we will be able to get there. But once again, it is all about us coming together in avenues like this to rub minds and then to see if we can signpost ourselves towards a better place in delivering these objectives. Once again, I want to thank us for allowing this time, and particularly to our two presenters for taking out the time to prepare this wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, and over to you, Dr. Mano.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chairman, for pushing that fast, and thank you, Engineer Charles, for the appreciations. Typically, that would have been the end, but I just want to again appreciate the speakers once again. And I see Dr. Soumare had posted a link to an expression of interest for a project, I think, probably relevant to some of us. You can take a look at that in the chat box. And I'll be concluding with words that have been posted as well by one of our attendees, a program manager at the African Circular Economy Alliance. Yeah, it goes thus. The advantage we have as a developing world is that we are still in the process of industrialization. So there is an opportunity to get it right at this stage with climate smart technologies. This is when we compare it to economies that already have non-climate smart systems in place. That's quite apt. That's by Bomwa Fuanqual, a friend, and a colleague also in this sustainability space. And I think that concludes really all of the things that have been said today by our experts. Thank you again, once again, for coming, and wishing you all the very best in your negotiations at the COP26. Just to reiterate again that Dr. Arona Soumare is leading the delegation, an African delegation, to the negotiations, and will be in Glasgow here with us next week, is it? Yes, next week for the COP negotiations. So, and also part of an announcement for those in Glasgow, streets are going to be closed. You should just keep in touch with the news to see how to move around during the entire period of the COP. And there's also there are free public tickets for, is it called the Green Zone area of the events at the SECC. So if you just Google the ukcop26.org, you would see some Green Zone tickets available for exhibitions. You can attend 3 of the events and see activities there. And I think Dr. Soumare was also inviting us to an African session as well of the program. Yes? Okay. Right, so we'll
share views of the overall program of the African Pavilion and some of the high-level events we're organizing.
Okay.
We can want to get some pass for you, maybe.
That would be very well appreciated. Very well appreciated. So,
in Glasgow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So
yeah, we'll be looking forward to have you in Glasgow. Yeah, we'll make you feel at home and get you to eat all the aggies here.
And it's quite cold, so come prepared.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to everyone. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll stop the recording, and if you just want to keep chats going, that's also fine.
Okay, thanks.